It was the spring of 1984, and there I sat in a crowded church in Rochester, New York. The audience consisted predominantly of men, pastors, professors, seminary students, and at least one of the wives of the seminary students, and that would be me. I was there to hear the Reverend Prathia Hall preach at the Mordecai Wyatt Johnson Institute of Religion, an annual preaching event that was sponsored by the Colgate Rochester Divinity Schools, where my husband was a student. I was there at a time when I searched for greater meaning and purpose in my life. And unbeknownst to me, what I would experience that night would forever change my path. Prathia. I remember, as if it were yesterday, many of the comments that were spoken as we waited for the preacher to mount the pulpit. Man, are we in store for a word tonight? Have you heard Prathia preach before? She's somebody's powerful preacher. There were those who waited with great anticipation to hear the message that Prathia would bring. But on the other hand, there were many who were just like me, and we had never heard a woman stand behind the sacred desk to proclaim a word from on high. There were those who spoke unenthusiastically. I don't know. Never heard a woman bring it. Prathia preached that night, and I wish that I could tell you every word that was spoken, but I must confess I don't remember. But what was left was an indelible memory etched in my mind that reminded me of the powerful force from which she spoke. It was a force that stirred even the greatest skeptic who believed that no woman could ever say anything, no woman preacher could ever preach like that. But within moments, the room was filled with standing men and a woman, at least that was me, standing, receiving, embracing the word that Prathia brought. At the core of her message that night, and for that matter, every time Prathia stood before an audience, was her belief in something that she called freedom faith. It was the faith she believed that God wants all people to be free, and God equips and empowers those who work for freedom. Whether black or white, Jew or Gentile, male or female, Prathia spoke to each and every one of us, preaching against all forms of oppression and encouraging us, compelling us all to roll up our sleeves, accept the call to work for freedom, confident that in our work, God equips and empowers. She was articulate. And she was articulate, and she spoke with an eloquence, and she elocuted perfectly. There was no superfluous speaking, nor stringing together of redundant cliches, but her message was one that was spoken as if it had been addressed to her specifically from on high to liberate and to bring hope to the broken. Spoken as a true freedom warrior who had experienced being jailed and cursed while serving as a student activist. She was a member of SNCC. She had sat at the counters in Selma, Alabama. She had been cursed and she had been spat upon. She charged us to act. Little did I know that night, but I was listening to the voice of a woman who had some 20 years before stirred the hearts of a Southern community who had just experienced one of its churches burned to the ground by the Ku Klux Klan. Little did I know, but I was listening to the voice of the woman who was asked to deliver a prayer to an audience that happened to have in attendance the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and it was recounted that she repeated spontaneously these words, "I have a dream." Prathia prayed, I have a dream that someday we will all be free. I have a dream that one day I have a dream. And it was her words, Prathia's words, that inspired and shaped the infamous Martin Luther King speech, I have a dream. On that night, I heard the message from Prathia for the first time. It was a message that she had spoken before, and she would speak again and again until the day that she died. On that night in Rochester, the question of whether a woman preacher could bring it was laid to rest. Not only did that woman preacher preach, but she spoke a word that empowered even me and caused me to unleash and accept the call of ministry that was on my life, a call to free the oppressed and to speak hope to my community. You see, I had never seen a Prathia. There were no Prathias in my life. I'd never heard a woman stand and speak and preach from the pulpit as she spoke that night. My life was forever changed. And not only was my life forever changed, but my husband, who was tasked some 10 years later to bring someone to be the dean of students and dean of chapel at United Theological Seminary, he remembered the voice of Prathia. He remembered her message. He remembered the character with which she spoke and her freedom, faith, courage. And he invited her to come and join the faculty at United Theological Seminary. She accepted the invitation, and she moved to Dayton, Ohio. Soon she became not only the woman preacher that I would admire from afar, but she became a personal friend and a mentor. And her freedom faith stories forever shaped my spiritual formation. As I reflect on over 30 years of ministry, I know that I must attribute my call and my response to the call of ministry to Prathia Hall. It was her spoken voice, intelligent, articulate, profoundly prophetic, that guided me through the preparation and delivery of many of sermons. It was her courageous acts that unapologetically prioritized the fight for the freedom of the oppressed and justice for those whose voices could not be heard. That has given me meaning to my life and purpose to my work. It has been the voice of Prathia Hall that has challenged me to see my ministry beyond the walls of the church and into the Dayton community. Her voice that has encouraged me and inspired me to work tirelessly over the past 6 years to bring about and rebuild a neighborhood, bringing needed healthcare services and behavioral services for children, employment and education for adults, and affordable living for seniors. Her voice that has told me to roll up my sleeves and pursue change the way every freedom faith warrior ought to do. Her voice that has resonated within me. Take courage, sister. In times when pastors still, or when prophetic leaders still refuse to hear the voices of women in the pulpit. Her voice, one woman's voice, has inspired me and countless men and women. We are they who have heard your voice, Prathia, and we roll up our sleeves to act for the cause of freeing those who are oppressed and those whose voices cannot be heard, confident that in the work, God still empowers and equips. One woman, one voice.
Yes. Yes.